On Saturday, we began to kind of just put together some of the basic issues that we have to kind of come to grips with. I want to do just at the beginning today, because we've been to probably half a dozen other talks and things between then and now. And I just want to refresh our recollection of what we were doing. As I said, there on Saturday, I began to explain that even though we've been having this rather intense, increased spate of conversations about the UFO issue that have been coming to the fore, that most recently, the whole discussion about Jake Barber and the interviews that were journalist, lawyer, journalist, actually from Australia, has been conducted with half a dozen men, all of them so far, that have been personally engaged in the actual physical recovery of craft. And it's not exactly clear yet from those conversations whether the craft that they've been primarily, quote, recovering or picking up have been replicas or copies of UFO craft that have been built by private aerospace industries, or not, or whether these are the actual originals. But there's some indications that at least some of those recoveries have been from actual UFO craft occupied at the time of their recovery by beings from another dimension or another solar system, star system, our planet, from our planet. But the bottom line is that that's been sort of the latest rush that's going on right now, is these interviews. These have followed previously, most recently, the hearings that we had in the House of Representatives back in November, where Lou Elizondo primarily testified under oath. The fellow who I'm his attorney, as probably most of you know, that's my sort of most recent incarnation. I've been the attorney for 20 years for the Stephen Greer's disclosure project. I've been John Mack's attorney for 10 years before his unfortunate death in 2004. And before that, as Ellen pointed out, being general counsel to the investigation and research that was done at the request of President Carter immediately after he was elected back in 1976. So I've been at this for some 47 years in these different incarnations. And the event that immediately preceded this kind of most recent spate of interviews by Ross Coulthard of not only Jake Barber, but Rand, also Fred Baker. I believe you saw that, and this fellow Don Paul of Bales. There's a handful of these men who are in the various kind of special forces groups, Air Force and others, that come from this kind of covert operations, kinetic operations, as they call it. That means active field operatives that are being interviewed, who have immediate first-person experience of having recovered one or more of these craft. And they say that the immediate previous major event was Lou Elizondo's testimony in front of the House Oversight Committee back on November 13th of last year, 2024, in which he specifically stated under oath for the first time that yes, indeed, as the director of the 10-year program, top secret program in the Pentagon, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, that he could confirm for the Congress for the first time that indeed David Grush's earlier testimony back in July of 2023, it was true, in which David Grush asserted that as a member of the UAP task force, he was able to testify based upon his interview with some 40 different people who had first-hand information, that in fact our government was in possession of one or more non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft, and that we were in possession of one or more bodies of the biological beings that were occupying those vehicles, and that we were now able to confirm that they were non-human. And both Rush and Lou Elizondo testified under oath to Congress that there was an element deeply buried inside our national security state apparatus that was working directly with private aerospace corporations to actively reverse engineer the technology that was recovered from these downed spacecraft for the purpose of developing a secret weapon system to be deployed on the part of our United States government. Now that's, you would think that with that kind of sworn testimony through the United States Congress, that we would have reached the point where there are entire news media on the planet would be kind of jumping up and down, spending virtually full time trying to get to the bottom of all of this. It hasn't happened quite yet. But there's been a lot more openness about the national media talking about these specific issues. Beginning back in 2017, if you recall, when Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, who was the Deputy Assistant Director of the United States Defense Department for Intelligence, actually both came forth and were interviewed by the New York Times. Leslie Keene, who many of you may know, who's been at this for a long time, and Ralph Blumenthal, both prepared that front page series of stories for the New York Times, who were published on December 17th of 2017. That event actually is what has initiated this kind of more recent, intense period during which major mainstream news media have started saying, wait a second, are you telling me that the United States government is now admitting that they are in possession of extraterrestrial non-human origin spacecraft and the bodies of non-human beings that are occupants of it? Is that what you're saying to me? Well, that's of course exactly what they're saying to them. And so it's really strange that the media keep asking that question. Is that what you're saying to me? Yes, that's what I just said to you. But they haven't been able to quite absorb it yet. And because of that, a significant percentage of the American population in the rest of the world haven't been being told by the entities to which they usually refer to try to figure out what's going on in the world. So most of the people haven't quite grokked it yet, that this is actually exactly what it is that they're saying. Okay? But my point was on Saturday that despite this more recent period of kind of a lot of activity and discussion going on about this, and more activity in which the national news media, such as the New York Times or 60 Minutes on CBS, actually relating stories comparatively confined, as you will know, to what it is that Lou Elizondo and these witnesses have specifically said, i.e. that we're in possession of, we have recovered one or more non-human origin spacecraft, and the bodies, non-human bodies of the occupants, and the potential re-engineering or reverse engineering program. You'll note that's still confined with what it is that has been told
to Congress in public. Okay? And so you can still see that they still aren't dealing with the issue of the fact that there are literally tens of thousands of people around the world who have been reporting for decades that they've been having direct face-to-face physical encounters with UFO vehicles on the ground and direct interactions with the non-human occupants of these vehicles. In fact, as we all know now, the people who have been attempting to share that information with their friends and neighbors have been actively attacked by a program that has been confirmed now by Richard Dolan in his major 2-volume work called UFOs and the National Security State, where he has actually secured copies of the internal top secret classified documents showing that our United States Defense Department and the Central Intelligence Agency and even the FBI have been actively engaged in suppressing people who were attempting to share their experience, their direct first-person experience. And this includes U.S. military personnel. This includes police officers. It includes, lawyers and doctors and school teachers and librarians. People that are traditionally accepted in our discredit those individuals, right? So we know that. But now, as I said, now that Lou Elizondo and Dave Rush and people who have been being interviewed now by Russ Coltar are coming forward, we've been working to get these individuals physically presented to people in the Senate Intelligence Committee and in the House Oversight Committee to give their testimony to them, at least in private, under oath, to the staff people and to the direct senators and House members. So we've been involved in that. Our New Paradigm Institute, as soon as I was contacted by Lou Elizondo, after he had already given his report to the New York Times, and he was himself subject to the attacks of people from inside the Pentagon, Susan Gao and others, where they were explicitly falsely stating that they never heard of Lou Elizondo, that he never has had any position in the Defense Department, that none of this is true. I mean, they were doing that. And Lou got so upset about that, that he, as the head of the 10-year, 8 years, he was the director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. For the 2 prior years, he had been the chief of security for that program. But he reached out to me, strangely enough, as the former attorney for John Mack, and the then still present attorney for the Disclosure Project of Dr. Stephen Greer, to engage me as his attorney to prepare a complaint against those people inside the Defense Department and intelligence agencies who were lying about him publicly, and much more through the discussions that Lou and I had over the crafting of that particular formal complaint to be filed with the Inspector General of the Defense Department. We expanded that complaint to be complaining not only against the individuals who were officially making those statements that were false, but in fact challenging
the entire Defense Department and the intelligence agencies for actively lying to Congress, asserting that that was unconstitutional, and these were criminal violations that were going on. And so that we, in meeting with the Inspector General, we went to, I'd always thought that it was inside the Pentagon, but it turns out that the Inspector General's office has an entire building right next door to the Pentagon. So independent in the Pentagon. But anyway, we went and sat down to talk with them, and initially there was this kind of standoffish, you guys are being accused of, lying and pretending that you were involved in some secret program, and the Defense Department is officially denying it, but within 10 minutes, we had the Inspector General leaning across the table in trance and bringing in more and more staff and bringing in military officials with all their medals stuff on, or their insignias, around the table, and it became very obvious that they had realized that for years that they were being lied to, and it was being concealed from them. And here they were actually having an opportunity to hear it directly from the horse's mouth, telling them what was going on. There was even some reluctance at the time that I was sitting right there beside it. I was saying, oh, and by the way, there's this other information that you should know about. And they would say things like, well, it'd be a little difficult. We don't know how to really get hold of them. I said, well, here's his phone number. Here's the phone number. Here's their name. Here's their email. Here's where they live. And then we were going, okay. And so there was this extraordinarily interesting process that went on. And in the complaint, what Lou was demanding is that they tell the Congress this information because it was completely unconstitutional. And I will point out that Lou was aware of the fact that it was unconstitutional. It wasn't just me, as the co-founder of the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review, and a constitutional lawyer, sort of revealing this statement. I mean, Lou was aware of it and was very upset about it, which I think is an extraordinarily important thing, to have the guy who was the head of the program inside the Pentagon himself discerning that this was unconstitutional and that something had to be done about it. Now, that of course probably accounts for why it is he reached out to me to be his attorney, because he certainly knew that I shared that view. And so that we were able to construct a complaint which was much more far-reaching than just simply complaining about the fact that they were lying about him. And so that we demanded not only that they reveal the information to Congress, but that the Defense Department prepare a new set of protocols for authorizing, in fact, opening up a channel pursuant to which people inside all of the 6 military services could come forward and report the contacts that they had with these extraterrestrial craft, at least, right? Which they didn't have, because it was perfectly clear that anybody who attempted to move forward to file such a report, that it was viewed as damaging to their career, and that they would get pushback immediately. So when they would try to file a report, the people to whom they were filing it, their superiors, are you sure that you want to file this? Do you really believe that you want to file this? This is not going to be good for your career. They would go to all these lengths to keep them from even filing them. And then, if they insisted upon filing a report of a UFO contact, the first thing that was done by the United States military in the Defense Department was ordering them to go get a psychiatric examination. And they would assert, well, this is for your own good. That people are going to go around saying that you're crazy. And so we want to make sure that you can prove you're not crazy by having an official, psychiatric examination ordered right inside your career file. And so that deterred a substantial majority of people, even who had tried to insist upon filing these complaints. And it was clear from the documents that were obtained by Richard Dolan and published in his 2-volume report of UFOs in the national security state. There are the documents showing that this was a conscious program that was designed inside the Defense Department in coordination with the operations director of the Central Intelligence Agency to suppress and discredit these people. Not only that, but destroy their lives. Destroy their lives with their family by convincing their family that they were mentally ill, destroying their careers, and in many cases, destroying their careers, driving some of these people to suicide. You know, because they were just so completely brokenhearted, disheartened, as it were, over the way their own government was treating them. And since they thought it had been inside the government, and their entire sense of self-value came from the respect that they had obtained from inside the structures, and that they were being treated this way, that they collapsed emotionally, psychologically. They did. So this is what would have been going on, and because of this, the operation of this program for all these years, that's why the news media, who have people, this is absolutely true, have people buried inside those news organizations directly from the intelligence community and the Defense Department community, who are their, quote, national security reporters. These are the people who have the good contacts inside the national security apparatus. And so there they are. And they will come forward immediately to the defenders and say, don't print this. This is adverse to the national interests of the country. Don't print this. And so that the national news media have developed a habit, a frame of mind, pursuant to which they would themselves ridicule people who came to them to try to give them this information. Now, so this was the situation that was in place prior to this extraordinary decision was made on the part of the New York Times in December of 2017 to actually come forward and have this front page story as they put above the fold of the New York Times. And they published the videos, the 3 famous videos of the Tic Tac and the gimbal and the chest that they showed in their on-site report for the New York Times. So that began this new age, if you will, of talking about UFOs. And the thing that was so important for us to keep in mind here is that communication on the part of Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon was explicitly authorized by the United States Defense Department. The United States Defense Department Office of Pre-Publication Review and Security, DUPSR, they call it, actually authorized them to bring that information to the New York Times. Now, 99.9% of the people in the country don't rock that fact because they say, well, Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon are whistleblowers. They're people who have taken this horrible risk of incurring the wrath of the entire Defense Department. They break their security codes. And they can be criminally prosecuted. And they're extraordinarily brave. And I'm not saying that Lou and Chris aren't brave, because they certainly are. But the fact of the matter is that was cleared by the Defense Department for them to do that. And the same thing was true of David Grush. And David Grush, and all that Lou and Chris did back in December of 2017 was to tell the country that in the world that there was in fact a top secret program inside the Pentagon actively investigating UFOs, even though the official public position was that there was no such thing, and that they were still publishing reports from the Defense Department actively saying that there's no such thing. Okay, and so that was an important stage. But when the New York Times decided that they were going to publish this, obviously the New York Times had checked and confirmed that this was authorized. Now, that distinguishes it significantly from my earlier experience. You know, when I was at the Cahill Gordon Law Firm in New York City, we represented NBC News. And I was there because as co-founder of the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review back in 1968, I had actually initiated the case that ultimately established the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And I was recruited by the #1 corporate litigation law firm in the world on Wall Street that represented NBC and NBC News to come to their firm because I had been the one who initiated that case and was the one who crafted the First Amendment argument on the ground for protecting confidential news sources for news media people. So I was there when Neil Sheehan, no relation, at the New York Times was given the 47 volumes of the Pentagon Papers by Daniel Ellsberg. And I was the one who received the call from Jim Goodell, who was the general counsel for the New York Times, called me and asked if he could come over and meet with me because something had happened here. And I was in the position at that time that I said to him, look, I should get Floyd Abrams, our partner. He wasn't quite a partner, he was a senior associate. But he was our First Amendment guy inside for NBC. I said, so that I should go get Floyd, right? He said, yes, absolutely. I said, I'll get Gene Sheehan too, he was my partner. And we went forward and we had meetings. I happen to have been extraordinarily privileged that I was in the meeting where we made the decision to publish the Pentagon Papers. And so that I know what that process was like because we decided to publish the Pentagon Papers even though the Justice Department and the Defense Department were adamantly opposed to us doing that. So I know what that looks like inside there because I was the one that also got the telephone call from Whitney North Seymour, who was the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Once we decided to publish, we started publishing on June 13th, 1971. We published the first, and I was in the meeting. I remember when Jim Goodell said, well, what should we do with these books? Because other law firms, Ward, Day, and Ward, told us that if we didn't turn the documents back to the FBI right immediately, they were going to call the FBI and have Dan Ellsberg and Neil Sheehan arrested. That was their law firm, Ward. And Herb Brownell, who was one of the senior partners, turns out to have been the guy who crafted the entire security clearance structure for the United States military when he was in the military justice department. So that they threatened to, this is a little bit side, but the bottom line is that so that when Lord Day and Ward threatened to have them arrested, Jim Goodell had the courage to reach out to an alternative. And so he called me, who had done this case, because I knew him. Because when I went down to Cahill, I was writing the briefs not only for the New York, for the NBC, which because it was NBC journalists that we represented, but also I got to write the amicus briefs for the New York Times and for ABC and CBS and for the Washington Post. Frankly, because the other lawyers in the firm didn't know how to make the argument. Okay? And so I got to meet the Jim Goodell and the people, and that's why Jim called me. And so when he came over for the meeting, we're sitting in I don't want to get too far out here, our lawyers So the bottom line is here we are sitting in Floyd Abrams' office, and Jim Goodell, this big 6'4" guy, sitting in this little wheat French chair, sitting in front of Floyd Abrams' desk. Says, what should we do with these papers? I said, here, I'm a first year associate. I'm here sitting around. I said, print them. And
said, wait a second, that's not a decision of the firm. So Jim Goodell turns his chair to me and he said, really? He said, and I said, yeah. I said, the only real decision you need to make is the size of the font. On the front page of the New York Times. And so he said, oh, he said, what do you think they'll do? And I said, well, knowing Meathead Mitchell, John Mitchell, who was the Attorney General, I said, this is a fucking bond lawyer. And he thinks the Constitution is a ship that sits in the harbor in Boston. I said, and he said, well, what do you think his reaction will be? And I said, well, he'll probably threaten you and punch Sulzberger and Neil Sheehan, with criminal charges for doing this. And he said, criminal charges? And I said, yeah. He said, like what? And I said, if we're lucky, espionage. He said, espionage? And I said, yes. I said, but USB Gorham is an old United States Supreme Court case. He said, the concept of violating national security is so inherently vague and overbroad that the United States Supreme Court has already ruled that in order to prosecute someone criminally for espionage, you have to prove that they had specific scienter or evil intent to damage the national security of the United States. And they're never going to be able to prove that. So let's print these things. Right? So what I'm saying is I was there, and so I know what it looks like to defy the national security state. Okay? So I was in meetings when I got the call from Whitney Seymour, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, calls me on the phone. He says, "Hello, Mr. Sheehan?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "This is Whitney Seymour." And I said, Whitney Seymour. Am I supposed to know who you are? And I said, "I'm the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York." And I said, "Oh, right. That. And he was furious right from the moment that he heard that. And so he said, "I'm just calling you as a matter of courtesy. We're getting set to go over to the court tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And I'm asking you right now to voluntarily cease and desist from publishing these papers again. We already published the first day." And he said, and I said, no, we're not going to do that. And he said, "What? Now you're duty bound to talk to your client. That has to be a decision made on the part of your client." I said, no. I said, I'm not even asking. I said, the answer is no. I'm not going to do that. He said, "You've got to ask them. It's got to be there." I said, no. I said, "I'm telling you, we're not going to do that." He said, then I'm going to tell you that we're going to go in front of Judge Mary Gerfine tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock. And just as a courtesy, we wanted to let you know that we're going to be doing it." And I said, "You're going to be doing what?" I said, "Seeking like a prior restraint on the New York Times. Is that what we're talking about?" He says, "Well, I don't want to mince words on what this is." I said, "Yeah, it's a prior restraint. That's what they call it." And he said, "No, I'm not here to have a semantic argument. I'm just telling you as a matter of courtesy that we're going to be there." So I said, "Well, I said, Whitney, I said, we're awful busy over here right now. I said, so I'm not sure we're going to really have time to be there tomorrow. But I'll talk with Floyd about this." And he slams the phone down. Right? So then we go over the next day at 1 o'clock, right? And we're in chambers with Judge Murray Gerfine. And there's Whitney Seymour is there, and I'm there, and Floyd Abrams is there, Gene Shine is there, and they brought over the senior partner of our firm, Larry McKay, came over too. And we also had with us Alex Mickle, who was the constitutional law professor at Yale. He was Floyd Abrams' constitutional law professor. So he had with us. So we're in there, and so we're sitting there, and so I'm sitting here the very first year. I'm here first year as an associate, right? So I'm in the meeting, and so the judge said, "Well, Mr. Seymour," said, "it's your motion." So and the Whitney Seymour says, "Your Honor, there's information in these 47 volumes publicly disclosed will absolutely irreparably damage the national security of the United States." And so I said, "Like what?" And he kind of looked at me like that, and Floyd almost freaked out. And I said, he was his first year kid sitting in the back. And I said, "Like what?" And he said, "Well, I can't tell you. You don't have the adequate security clearances."
And I said to the judge, I said, good, are we done then? And then the judge looked at me and said, well, he said, Mr. Seymour, I said, well, like, what about me? What about the judge? You're coming to me to ask us to give a prior restraint, he said, using the right term. And he said, so you ought to at least share them with me. And the receiver said, no, Your Honor, I'm sorry, we can't share them with you either because you don't have a adequate security clearance. I said, okay, good, now we are done. Mr. Abrams, I'm assuming that your Cahill firm has a copy of these 47 volumes. I said, excuse me, Your Honor. Here I was first year guy again. I said, excuse me, Your Honor. I said, you can assume anything you want. We're not acknowledging that we're in possession of these 47 volumes. And he said, okay, Mr. Sheehan, I'm talking to Mr. Abrams. He said, Mr. Abrams, I just asked you as a courtesy to the court, would you be willing to provide a copy to me and to my law clerks here so that we can look through these things and unless left untutored by Mr. Seymour. You know, if we're unable to determine something's in these papers that irrevocably damages the national security of the United States, then of course I won't agree to grant any kind of restraint. And Floyd said, yes, we'll do that for you. I almost fell out of the chair. I said, you know, we're right on the brink of giving complete slam dunk of, denying their motion. And Floyd says, no, we'll do that, Your Honor, as a courtesy to the court. So, and then so the judge, logically enough, follows up with that. Also, says, Mr. Abrams, could you extend a further courtesy to the court, please, of having the Times voluntarily refrain from publishing any more of these until that I and my law clerks have an opportunity to go through the documents. And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Never. In 100 years are we going to agree to do that. And Floyd and the senior partner, Larry McKay, and Alex Pickle, head of the Constitutional Law Department, I was sitting there, this first year associate, telling me I'm going to agree. And so he said, well, then I'm going to impose a restraint on the New York Times, first and only time in the entire history of the United States. There's been a prior restraint imposed upon a publication. Unfortunately. No, that wasn't kind of cheering. Oh shit, I was totally surprised he did that. I thought I had him, but he did it. And so that we have this, so they provide the papers for them, we come back over. And the bottom line is that 13 straight days from the day we first published on June 13th of 1971 until the 26th, we were in front of the United States Supreme Court. And we won. And they declared that we had the right to publish these papers. So all of this is by way of saying, I know what it looks like to really confront the national security state and win, right? And so I know that what happened with regard to this decision to publish on the front page of the New York Times the account of their existing, the secret program inside the national security state to allow that to be published, that was a decision that was made by people in the New York Times in consultation with their national security people. And so that means that there was a high-level decision made at that time to reveal that much of the information, the existence of that program. Okay? And then when David Grush called me, and I knew David, I'd known David for some time because Lou Elizondo introduced me to him. Because it turns out that when Lou and Chris Mellon, had the papers published, or had the information published about the program, both of their security clearances were challenged. And I was representing Lou to keep them from revoking his security clearances. And I was in communication through Chris. And it turns out that the person who was assigned to review their two security clearances was David Grush. And David Grush had been the one who cleared them as soon as he found out that the United States Defense Department, pre-publication, the security office had cleared them to reveal this. He reestablished their security clearances. And then he started catching the ration, of it, and people threatening him and doing it. And so that's how I ended up having my initial communications with Dave Grush. So we were going back and forth.
advising on how, what it is he had to do, et cetera. And so that what we advised him to do is to him to put together a complaint to file, not with the Defense Department, with the Inspector General, because we already had them. They were already on board leaning across the table listening to all the information. So I said, go to the Inspector General for the intelligence community, because we got to get them on board with this. And so he did, and he went and filed the complaint with the Inspector General of the intelligence community. And that Inspector General was so floored by the information that he got that he decided he was going to retire and become the attorney for David Grush, which he did. And then so David, we organized a thing to get David Grush to come before the House Oversight Committee to testify under oath, where he then advanced the release of information, not only the fact that there existed this top secret program investigating the UFOs, but he released the information that we were in possession of at least one non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft, and the bodies of the occupants that were established to be non-human, and that there was an element inside the national security state that was actually actively engaged in reverse engineering the technology from these craft in order to build a secret weapon system. That freaked everybody out who understood what it was he was saying. You know, but people kept saying, oh, gee, what can that possibly be true? And then he was attacked. David Grush was attacked 2 days later by the release of information that he had had an incident where he had broken some stuff in his home and had a fit, and that he was suffering from post-traumatic stress because he'd been assigned to the Middle East and been in dangerous situations. So it turns out that the source of that release of that information line was inside the National Security State, Defense Department guys who released that information against him, exactly what they've been doing in the past. And so that this whole operation has been going on. But remember, David Grush had been authorized also by the United States Defense Department Office of Pre-Publication Security Review to release that information as well. So that is a decision that wasn't made by a whistleblower who was then threatened with potential criminal prosecution. It was part of a coordinated operation to release that information. So that's extraordinarily important for us to understand what's happening here. That this isn't a game of checkers going on. This is a game of chess that's going on. And it's not there, but it's two-dimensional chess going on right now. And so now we have the operation going on. But we set up through our Romero Institute. Romero Institute, 501c3 public interest cooperative and public policy group, is the progeny of our original Christian Institute. Some people remember that. We set up the Christian Institute out of Washington, D.C. when I was at the United States Jesuit headquarters. That we did that in connection with the Karen Silver case that we did. The Jesuit headquarters combined with the National Organization for Women to do the Karen Silver litigation, where we ended up revealing that the top secret program was going on of smuggling 98% pure bomb-grade plutonium out of the nuclear reprocessing facility out in Dixon, Oklahoma, to provide nuclear weapons material to the state of Israel and to the government of Iran at the same time. To be shared, that it was under the Shah at that time. Okay? It wasn't under Khomeini, it was under the Shah at the time. And that they were sharing the nuclear weapons materials with the South African, Afrikaner, right-wing, fascist, racist government in South Africa, and with the fascist government in Brazil. And this was the United States Central Intelligence Agency's operations director that was doing that. So we're the ones that ended up blowing the whistle on that. And then we went on to do the Iran Contra case. We had done the first American sanctuary defense for them arresting legitimate political refugees who were fleeing from the death squads down in Guatemala and El Salvador. And we did that litigation down in South Texas, in Brownsville, Texas,
And we ended up doing the Iran-Contra case, which we discovered in the context of that case, we uncovered the fact that they were smuggling weapons in the Reagan Bush administration under the supervision of George Bush Senior, who was the vice president. He and his national security advisor, Donald Ray, were the ones coordinating the illegal shipment of those weapons in violation of the Bolton Agreement. Well, these are things that are a little ancillary to the work of Congress. It's just demonstrating that we've been involved in these kind of cases now for 50 years. So that it was a wise move on the part of Lou Alexander to get in touch with us to do this for him. And so the point that I was making on Saturday was that even though this has been the more recent spate of activity with regard to the UFO issue, this started in December 2017, is carried on into 2023 with David Grush's testimony, and now into November 2024. Lou Alexander's testimony came into 2025, now with all the interviews by Rex Colfer, Jake Barber, and Fred Baker, and the rest of the guys, that it's got this drumbeat going here. It's gotten everybody so excited here at the Conscious Life Expo about, whoa, this UFO thing is really heating up. What I pointed out on Saturday to most of us is that, in fact, in 2009, in November of 2009, the Roman Catholic Church, Vatican, had issued an official public statement stating that now that we have begun to discover more and more of these new exoplanets, and so because of the mounting of the spaceborne telescopes, the Hubble and the Planck telescope, and now the Webb telescope, that we're discovering that there are, lo and behold, actually planets outside of our solar system. That of the trillions of other stars in the universe, it turns out they have planets too. And now that we can see them and register them. And so the bottom line is that the Vatican issued a statement on November 10th of 2009, stating that now that we're discovering more and more of these new exoplanets, it's now become clear that much earlier than had been previously assumed, we're going to be discovering life elsewhere in the universe. And therefore, time has arrived for the beginning of this extraordinarily important conversation addressing the profound philosophical and theological questions that are posed to our human family by the discovery of life elsewhere in the universe. As I told you on Saturday, because I had been general counsel for Amazon's Jesuit headquarters in Washington, D.C., in their National Public Policy Office, the National Social Ministry Office, for 10 years. I reached out and contacted Father Jose Gabriel Funes, who had issued a public statement on behalf of the Vatican. He was the director of the Continental Observatory at Casa Gandolfo, where they held a meeting with all the scientists and stuff back in November of 2009. So I reached out to him and I told him on Saturday. I went immediately to meet with him. And he, 2 minutes into our conversation, he said, look, he said, we're not talking here about the discovery of some single cellular life form underneath some frozen sea on some distant moon, some planet in some far distant galaxy. We're talking about another highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but distinctly non-human species right here in our local galaxy. So I said, right about time, I said, your time has come, and I have to start turning my attention to this issue that I have been involved with. By 2009, I've been involved in this for years. But our institute had not been. Our institute had been doing other cases, like the Carol case, the Contra case, the other cases that we've been involved with, the American Sanctuary Movement case, etc. But I said, we need to turn our attention to this now. And so that's how we have set up the New Paradigm Institute. Because there's a lot of people that wouldn't want to necessarily be associated, at least immediately, with all the other cases that we've done. Beating up on the national security state in the public in the Iran-Contra case, and
in Pentagon Papers case, this revealing the fact that there's smuggling, bomb-grade plutonium to Israel. There's all kinds of cases that people might want not be immediately associated with. So we set up the New Paradigm Institute so that people can see that we've been reaching out now to people all across the political spectrum to bring them into this conversation so that we can continue to have the conversation. And what we did on Saturday is I pointed out that I said, if we're being called upon as the citizenry or the laity, depending on how we view this, to have this extraordinarily important conversation about the profound philosophical and theological questions that are raised by our actual discovery of life elsewhere in the universe. I pointed out that there are a lot of other questions, in addition to just the philosophical and theological questions, that are going to have to be answered. What's going to be the impact on our geopolitical structures here on our planet? In light of the kind of comparative inefficiency and effectiveness of the United Nations at the present time. So I pointed out on Saturday, you can't stop the massive bombing of Gaza, can't really protect the state of Israel against being assaulted and 1,200 people killed by the Hezbollah. You can't do anything about what's going on in the Ukraine. That's not a very effective instrument right now for bringing us all together to make this kind of extraordinarily important decisions. But there are questions that we're going to have to answer as citizens about what kind of geopolitical structures we're going to be able to establish. What are going to be the economic? What's going to be the economic impact of having the discovery that there's a technology which has massive scientific implications. The technology is vastly beyond what we use. There's a lot of other questions, but I said if we direct our attention to these philosophical and theological questions that we've been called upon by the largest single religious denomination in all of Western civilization to come to grips with, that how do we begin to get an idea of what these fundamental questions are, even as laity or as civilians. We're not highly trained in this area. I spent a little more time than average people looking into this because I went back to Harvard to look into these things. After I graduated from college and from law school, I went back to my master's work and PhD work, and I'm trying to figure these things out. And I realized that the philosophical and theological questions are going to be different depending upon what it is that we discover. It's one thing if we discover just this fact that we discovered a single cell life form in some frozen sea, on some moon, orbiting some planet or part of this galaxy somewhere. It's going to be different than if we discover that it's a complex life form, not just some single cell life form, but it's engaged in this kind of evolutionary process, which would indicate that it might end up generating intelligent life. But if in fact we discover that there is intelligent life elsewhere, what if we discover there's highly intelligent life somewhere, and that it in fact is highly technologically developed? What if we discover that it's actually so highly technologically developed and it's close enough to us that we might actually be able to exchange communications with them? Okay. And what if we discover that they're so close that they have some technological development that they might actually be able to come here? Okay. So this starts to be a whole different set of questions that we're going to have here, a whole different level of intensity with which we have to approach these questions. Okay. And now what happens if we discover that not only that they could be getting, what if we discover that they are here? And what if we discover that they've been here for at least 80 years since the detonation of our first atomic bomb, and we've been being lied to about it all the time by our national security state people, and that the churches know about it, and they've been lying to us about it. Okay, and what if we discover that they've been here for 1,000,000 years? And that they were here even before our Homo sapiens species began to develop.
So what I'm saying is that there are these levels of the philosophical and even this philosophical and theological questions we have to ask ourselves that are different depending upon what it is that we actually come to understand about these things. So these are some of the discussions that we were having on Saturday just to set the stage for what we're going to be starting to do here today. Okay. So I say at the beginning of my remarks that this is one of the most extraordinarily important moments in all of human history, because we're personally involved in the process of trying to figure out how we initiate this discussion. Because even though there are discussions going on of kind of a much more limited nature, of, oh, do we really have a crack? You know, oh, have we really recovered bombs? You know, oh, are they actually back engineering these to develop a weapons? All of those are extraordinarily important questions. You know, but the reality is that somebody has to come to grips with these more profound philosophical, theological questions, and that I'm suggesting that we do that. So we pointed out, just preliminary to our conversation here today, and we're in a second, I pointed out that the philosophical questions really have to do with making a determination as to what's going on inside the total material universe that we're engaged in, the interaction between mass and energy inside our universe, and how do we comport our conduct in keeping in harmony with whatever the reality is that we can discern physically. But those secular questions are different than the theological questions. The theological questions are what was going on before our material universe actually came into being, and what's going on outside of the sum total of all of the mass and energy that makes up our physical universe. What's going on outside that? I mean, the fact is that right now we're probing with the James Webb Telescope, trying to figure out where the physical boundaries are of our material universe. That's actually going on. There are women and men right now, Monday morning, working away at their little computers, trying to figure this out based on the information that's coming back in from the James Webb Telescope. Right? Where are the physical boundaries of the universe that it's expanding out to? So the question arises, well, what's outside of that? And what implications does that have for how this whole thing got started? So that the point is that the questions that we ask philosophically about what's going on inside the material are philosophical questions, but these other questions are what we call theological. That's the term that we use. And that I pointed out that there's been a great deal of work done on trying to figure out philosophically what any ground of meaning may be for our human family. I pointed that out on Saturday that when I went back to the university to I give a little war story since we're all here kind of trying to say is that this happened because I was after I left the Cahill firm, I got recruited to go over to F. Lee Bailey's criminal defense firm, and F. Lee Bailey was at the time kind of the #1 criminal defense attorney in the country. This is before Jerry Spence got discovered. But Lee Bailey recruited me to come into the office after the Watergate burglary took place in June of 1972. So I went into his firm, and we were representing James McCord, who was the former CIA wiretapping specialist who was arrested in the Watergate Hotel. And he's the one that ended up blowing the whistle on Richard Nixon and the White House plumbers, counting the Judge Gazelle. John, whatever his name. Anyway, he told them that, oh, look, there's a plumbing unit, and Nixon's in charge of it, Nixon's involved in making the decisions, etc., which resulted in his resignation. But when I went over there in Bailey's office, I was focusing on working on that particular case. That's why I went over there. But once we got that resolved, and Nixon resigned, I think that Bailey kept wanting me to work on other cases One of the cases, I should just tell you since we're in a setting we have a good time. You know, what had happened is this older gentleman in Boston had a little mom and pop grocery store, and these two big, neck dudes come into his store on like a late Friday afternoon. They said that we want to sell you Angulo fire insurance. And he said, "Oh, I don't need Angulo fire insurance. I already have a fire insurance policy." And they said, "Well, you don't have an insurance policy to ensure that your place won't be burnt to the ground next Friday night." And he said, "Look," he said, "you go up to Steve, he said, you see these numbers here on my arm?" He said, "I got these in Auschwitz." He said, "So, you assholes don't frighten me." Big mistake. Turns out that they found out that he had a single child, a daughter, who was like 8 months pregnant. They chased her down the Mass Pike, chased her off onto a site there where she ran into a phone booth that were in the middle of the site. This is on him, tried to call 911, and they shotgunned her right straight through the glass and killed her. And a huge manhunt was going on about who had done this, and it was all the Boston Globe papers and all this stuff. And the heat was on so intensely that like 5 days later, somebody, going at 100 miles an hour right past the place where she was killed on the Mass Pike, threw a guy out of the car and bounced him down the highway for like about a mile. And we was laying there dying on the side of the road. And the Massachusetts State Police car rolled up and found him lying there and recognized him as one of the Angulo brothers' mob guys, hitmen. And the hired Johnny, you're dying, you're dying, you're gonna die. I swear to God, if you will just tell me who is it that ordered you to do this hit, I'll get it for you. And the guy, sort of with his dying breath says, "It's Michael Angulo." And so they rushed the guy to the hospital, to Mass General, and he lives.
Yes.
Right? So he lives. They bring back the light, and now they're faced with this situation where they got a live witness getting accepted to testify about Mikey Angulo. So I'm in the office, in Lee Bailey's office, and Lee called me